What if the real reason you can't let go isn't love, but the hope that winning them would finally prove you're enough? Because that hope has a strange kind of power. It keeps you awake. It keeps you checking. It keeps you rereading old messages like they're scripture. Like somewhere between a period and an emoji, there's a hidden promise you missed. And the cost is subtle at first. It doesn't announce itself as tragedy. It shows up as minutes, tiny, invisible payments you make all day long. A glance at your phone, a quiet wave of tension in your chest. A distraction that steals the best part of your attention right before a meeting, right before sleep, right before life. And I want to start with a truth that's firm but not cruel. If you can't have them, not in a real, mutual, consistent way, then what you're doing is not building love. You're building a waiting room, and waiting rooms feel safe because you don't have to face the final answer. You don't have to grieve. You don't have to step into that empty space where you might have to choose yourself. So let's name it clearly. There's a difference between wanting someone and being chosen by them. Wanting is private. It can be intense. It can be beautiful. It can make you feel alive. But being chosen, really chosen, has a different signature. It's consistent. It's clear. It doesn't require you to decode silence. It doesn't make you work for basic respect. It doesn't leave you constantly asking, "What does this mean?" Because the meaning is obvious in the behavior. The meaning is obvious in the effort. And if you're honest, the pain you feel right now isn't only about missing them. A lot of it is about living inside uncertainty. Because uncertainty is a special kind of poison. It doesn't just hurt you. It keeps you attached to the thing that hurts you. You tell yourself, "I'm just being patient." But patience is for things that are growing. Patience is for people who are showing up. Patience is for a future that is actually moving closer. What you're doing when the pattern is hot and cold, when the energy is inconsistent, when you're always the one reaching, always the one hoping, that's not patience. That's bargaining with reality. And you might be thinking, okay, but what if they're just busy? What if they're going through something? What if they actually care but they're scared? Listen, maybe all of those things are true. But here's the uncomfortable question. Even if they are true, what does it change about your life right now? Because what matters is not the most flattering interpretation of their behavior. What matters is the pattern you're living inside, and whether that pattern is turning you into someone you respect. Let me make it personal for a second, without pretending I know your exact story. Maybe there's this one person you can't get out of your mind. Maybe you don't even talk that much, but the little moments you do have feel electric. Maybe you're not in a real relationship, but you're not in one either. It's that strange gray zone where everything is implied, nothing is promised, and you keep waiting for the moment when it becomes real. And that's where time starts to disappear, because you begin to organize your emotional life around them. You wake up and you check. You go to sleep and you check. You measure your day by whether they appeared. You interpret their absence as a problem to solve instead of a message to accept. You start living like a detective in your own life, collecting clues, building theories, hoping the next piece of evidence will finally give you permission to relax. But the truth is, if someone wants to be in your life, you don't have to solve them. You don't have to chase clarity like it's a rare resource. Clarity is what healthy connection produces naturally. So here's the first big shift I want you to make in your mind, just for the next few minutes. Stop asking, "Do they like me?" Start asking, "Is this good for me?" Not, "Is it possible?" Not, "Is it romantic when it's complicated?" Not, "Am I being too sensitive?" Is it good for you? Does it make you more grounded or more anxious? Does it help you build your life, or does it keep you suspended? Does it increase your self-respect, or does it quietly teach you that your needs are negotiable? Because your life isn't a debate club where you're supposed to argue yourself out of basic dignity. And here's another truth, one that might sting, but also might set you free. A lot of the time, the person you can't have isn't special because of who they are. They're special because of what they represent. They represent a possibility, a redemption story, a fantasy where you finally get chosen, finally feel enough, finally feel seen. And when you attach your sense of worth to that outcome, you don't just want them, you need them. Not because they're your soulmate, but because your identity started leaning on their approval like a crutch. And that's why it's so hard to let go, because letting go feels like losing them, and losing the you that you thought you could become with them. So let's slow down. What are you really chasing? Is it them? Or is it the version of yourself you imagine you'll be if they finally say yes? Because if it's the second one, then we're not talking about romance anymore. We're talking about self-worth. We're talking about the quiet belief that your value has to be confirmed by someone who withholds it. And that's not love. That's a rigged game. Now, this is important. I'm not here to tell you that your feelings aren't real. They are real. They matter. But feelings are not always truth. Feelings are sometimes a chemical reaction to uncertainty. Sometimes they're a habit. Sometimes they're a coping strategy. Sometimes they're your mind trying to solve an old wound using a new person. And if you've ever felt that pull to someone who can't meet you fully, someone emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, unclear, you might already know how this story goes. At first, it's thrilling. It feels like depth. It feels like fate. Then it becomes a loop. You get a little attention and you light up. You don't get it and you crash. You start working for the next hit like your mood depends on it. Because in a way, it does. And the scary part is how normal it starts to feel. You get used to waiting. You get used to uncertainty. You get used to the idea that love is supposed to hurt. But love isn't supposed to hurt like this. Love can be challenging, yes. Love can require patience, yes. Love can demand growth. But it does not require you to abandon yourself. So here's where we begin. Not with a dramatic speech, not with revenge, not with a sudden coldness that you can't sustain. We begin with one clean commitment. You stop paying for maybe with your time, because time is the currency you can never earn back. And if this episode does one thing for you, let it do this. Let it return you to the center of your own life. In the next part, I want to show you something that changes everything. The difference between missing a person and missing a story you built around them. And once you see that difference clearly, you stop negotiating with illusions. And you start making decisions that actually heal you. You're not missing them. You're missing a version of life that only exists in your head. And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean it as a relief, because if what's holding you isn't a real, stable, mutual relationship, then you're not trying to forget a person. You're trying to stop feeding a story. And stories, unlike people, can be rewritten. Let's take a careful look at what actually happens when you're stuck on someone you can't have. You don't just think about them. You think about what it would mean if they chose you. You imagine the moment they finally see you clearly, finally understand you, finally commit, finally stay. And in that imagined future, everything else in your life gets lighter. You become calmer, more confident, more lovable, more safe. It's like your brain is using them as a key that unlocks a whole new emotional apartment you've been locked out of. That's the fantasy. Not necessarily a silly fantasy. Sometimes it's beautiful. Sometimes it's deeply human. But it's still a fantasy because it's built on potential rather than pattern. And here's the thing about the human mind. It's not designed to fall in love only with reality. It's designed to fall in love with possibility. Possibility is intoxicating because possibility has no limits. It can't disappoint you the way a real person can because it's not constrained by actual behavior. Possibility doesn't have to reply on time. Possibility doesn't have to show up consistently. Possibility doesn't have to treat you with basic respect. Possibility can be perfect forever, right up until you look at your messages and remember that the actual person hasn't chosen you. So you swing back and forth between two worlds. In the fantasy world, it's close, it's coming, it's almost here. In the real world, it's unclear, it's inconsistent, it's not happening, and that swing is exhausting. But it also keeps you hooked, because when you feel the pain of reality, you reach for fantasy to soothe it. And when fantasy feels too fragile, you try to create evidence in reality by texting, checking, hinting, accidentally running into them, staying available. It's a loop, and loops feel like movement even when you're standing still. Now, I want to zoom in on something specific that makes this kind of attachment brutally powerful. The mind's tendency to make a highlight reel out of scarcity. When attention is consistent, your nervous system relaxes. When attention is scarce, your nervous system starts to bargain. It starts to treat little things as huge. A short reply becomes a sign. A smile becomes hope. "We should hang out sometime" becomes a plan. You begin to magnify crumbs because your brain is trying to keep the story alive. And that's not because you're naive, it's because you're hungry. Not hungry for them necessarily, hungry for what they symbolize. And if you're honest, you might already sense what that symbol is. For some people, the symbol is validation. If they want me, I'm worth wanting. For some people, it's safety. If I'm chosen, I won't be alone. For some people, it's redemption. If they choose me, it proves I didn't miss my chance at love. For some people, it's identity. If I get them, I become the version of me I always hoped I could be. This is why the obsession can survive even when the relationship barely exists. Because the relationship isn't the main product. The product is what you get to feel when you believe the story. And the story has a very seductive structure. It usually sounds like this. They don't choose people easily, but maybe I'm different. They're complicated, but maybe I understand them. They're scared, but my love can help them feel safe. They're not ready, but I can wait. That sounds noble. It even sounds romantic. But there's a quiet danger inside it. You're placing your life on hold for someone else's readiness. And a person who is not ready to choose you is not a problem you can solve with loyalty. That's the hard line, because you can be kind, patient, understanding, and still be abandoned by ambiguity. You can be the best version of yourself and still not be chosen by someone who isn't available. Which brings us to a painful but freeing distinction. Their unavailability is not your assignment. It doesn't mean they're evil. It doesn't mean you were wrong for caring. It doesn't mean the connection was fake. It means it doesn't work. And the reason this is so difficult is because your brain keeps whispering, but it could work. Yes, it could. A lot of things could happen. You could win the lottery tomorrow. An old friend could knock on your door with the exact apology you've been waiting for. Life has surprises, but you cannot build your life around what could happen. You build your life around what is happening. So here's a question I want you to sit with, even if it makes you uncomfortable. If you remove the fantasy, if you remove the one day, the maybe, the almost, the if only, what do you actually have with this person right now? Not what you felt once, not what you hoped, not what they implied. What do you have? Do you have consistency? Do you have clarity? Do you have mutual effort? Do you have a relationship that makes you feel more stable than anxious? If the answer is no, then what you're grieving is not a relationship. You're grieving a dream. And grieving a dream is strange because it feels like you're losing someone who never fully existed in your life the way you imagined. That's why it can feel confusing. You might even feel embarrassed, like, why am I this wrecked? We weren't even together. But your nervous system doesn't grieve contracts. It grieves attachment. It grieves the future you rehearsed 1,000 times in your head. And here's where we do something courageous. We stop treating your pain as proof that you should keep trying. We start treating your pain as information. Something inside you is asking for certainty, for dignity, for a life that doesn't require you to beg for basic reciprocity. In the next part, I want to explain why this hurts like an addiction, why rare attention can be more powerful than steady love, and how your brain gets trained to chase uncertainty. And once you see that mechanism clearly, you'll stop romanticizing the loop, and you'll start breaking it. There's a reason this kind of attachment can feel stronger than normal love. It's not because you're broken. It's because your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do: chase rewards that are uncertain. Let me explain this in a simple way. If someone gives you warmth consistently, your nervous system learns, okay, this is safe. You relax. You still care, but you're not obsessed. You can think about other things. Your life stays wide. But if someone gives you warmth unpredictably, sometimes yes, sometimes no, sometimes a spark, sometimes silence, your nervous system doesn't relax. It scans, it strategizes, it becomes hyper-alert because the reward might come at any moment, and missing it feels unbearable. This is the same principle that makes slot machines so addictive, not because the rewards are big, because the rewards are random, and randomness is rocket fuel for craving. You get one message after a long silence, and suddenly your entire mood changes. Your body feels lighter. Your mind starts writing poetry again. You think, see, it's alive. It's real. You forget the hours you spent anxious. You forget the nights you felt small. That one message becomes a reset button. And then, when the silence returns, you crash. Not just emotionally, chemically. Because what your brain learns is, don't stop. The next hit could be the one that changes everything. And that next hit isn't just attention. It's meaning. It's validation. It's relief. It's hope. So you begin to chase the feeling of almost being chosen. That's why it's so hard to stop. Not because you're dramatic, not because you're weak, because your brain has been trained by a pattern, intermittent reward. Now here's where it gets even more intense. When you're attached to someone you can't have, you're not just chasing them, you're chasing closure. Your brain hates open loops. It hates unfinished stories. It hates questions without answers. So it keeps replaying. What did they mean? Why did they pull away? Did I do something? Are they thinking about me? Will they come back? And every time you replay, you think you're solving it. But you're not solving it. You're feeding it. because the brain doesn't distinguish between thinking about the problem and being inside the relationship. The emotional circuits light up either way. The body reacts either way. So rumination becomes a way to stay connected without actually being connected. It's like keeping a candle lit in an empty room, convincing yourself someone might walk back in. And then there's the second ingredient that turns this into obsession: identity. When you care about someone, it's normal to want them. But when you believe that being chosen by them would finally mean something about you, your worth, your attractiveness, your lovability, then the pursuit stops being romantic and starts being existential. Because now it's not, do I want them? It's, do I matter? And once the stakes become your value as a human being, your brain will do anything to avoid losing. It will reinterpret signs. It will minimize disrespect. It will justify neglect. It will call anxiety chemistry. It will call inconsistency depth. It will call your suffering loyalty. And that's the tragedy. You become loyal to a pattern that is not loyal to you. Let's pause and get very honest. If you were truly safe with this person, would your mind be this loud? If it were truly mutual, would you be this confused? If you were truly chosen, would you be spending so much time trying to decode silence? Because peace is not a mystery. Peace doesn't need interpretation. Peace doesn't arrive in fragments. Now, I want to be careful here, because sometimes there is uncertainty in early stages. Sometimes people are genuinely figuring things out. Sometimes timing is complicated. I'm not here to overclaim, but here's what I am willing to say with confidence. Your nervous system is not built to thrive inside prolonged ambiguity, and prolonged ambiguity is not a requirement for real love. So the question becomes, what do you do with this knowledge? Because understanding the mechanism is helpful, but it's not the same as breaking it. You can intellectually agree with everything I'm saying and still feel the craving tonight. That's why the next step isn't a mindset. It's a boundary, a real boundary. Not the kind you announce dramatically, the kind you enforce quietly, consistently, like you're protecting something sacred, your time. In the next part, we're going to talk about the hidden deal you're making, this quiet belief that if I win them, I'm finally enough, and how to break that deal without collapsing, because once you remove that deal, the obsession loses its power. It's like pulling the plug out of the wall. You're going to feel this one in your chest, because it's not just a romantic story. It's a contract you never signed out loud, but you've been paying for anyway. Here's the hidden deal in its simplest form. If they choose me, it proves I'm enough. And when you make that deal, quietly, privately, this person stops being just a person. They become a verdict, a mirror, a gatekeeper to your self-respect. That's why you can't let go, because letting go doesn't feel like losing them. It feels like losing the chance to finally win the case for your own worth. So let's slow down and look at what that deal does to you. It makes you tolerate confusion, because clarity would force you to face the possibility that they won't choose you. And if they don't choose you, the deal says you lose. The deal says you're not enough. But that's not reality. That's the deal talking. It makes you overperform. You become careful, strategic. You choose your words like you're diffusing a bomb. You monitor your tone. You hold back needs. You pretend you're low maintenance because you think need is what scares people away. You edit yourself into someone you believe they could finally pick. And one day you realize you've been trying to earn what should have been freely offered. Consistent effort, clear intention, basic respect. The deal makes you see their scarcity as value. Because when something is hard to get, the mind assumes it must be precious. But sometimes it's not precious. Sometimes it's just unavailable. A locked door is not a treasure chest. It's just a door that doesn't open. Now here's the hard part, said gently. You don't actually want a person who can't have you. You want the version of you who finally feels chosen. That's what you're chasing. And that version of you feels so close because your brain keeps attaching it to one outcome, them. If I get them, I become that person. But that's a trap because it gives away all your power. It makes your growth dependent on someone else's mood, readiness, history, fear, timing, and it makes you live like this. When they're warm, you feel worthy. When they're cold, you feel disposable. That is not a love story. That's emotional outsourcing. And you can't build a stable life while renting your self-worth from someone who doesn't even consistently show up. So, how do you break the deal? Not by forcing yourself to stop caring, not by shaming yourself for feeling. You break it by making a new deal, one you can actually keep. Here's the new deal. My worth is not up for negotiation. My life is not a waiting room. I do not audition for someone who is unsure. Say it again in your own words, but keep the structure. Value, time, dignity. Because this isn't just affirmation fluff. It's a cognitive boundary. It's you telling your brain, we are not using external approval as the final judge anymore. Now, I want to be honest. When you first break the deal, you will feel panic, because the fantasy will fight back. Your mind will bring up the best memories, the sweetest lines, the strongest chemistry. It will say, but what if you're wrong? What if you let go right before it happens? That's the addiction talking. That's the slot machine logic. One more pull. So the way you break the deal isn't by arguing with every thought. It's by changing the rules of engagement. Here's a simple rule that can save you months. You do not take emotional advice from a craving. A craving is not wisdom. A craving is a wave. It rises, it peaks, and it passes if you stop feeding it. But if you feed it, if you text, check, stalk, accidentally reach out, reread, you teach your brain that craving is an emergency that must be solved. And then you wonder why it keeps coming back louder. So let's give you something practical right now, inside the story, without turning this into a checklist. The next time you feel the urge to reach out, you do 3 things in order. First, you name it. This is a craving, not a truth. Second, you delay. I wait 24 hours before any action. Third, you redirect. You do one pre-chosen action that interrupts the loop. Walk outside, cold water on your face, 10 deep breaths, a message to a friend, a journal line that starts with, if I contact them, I'm really trying to feel. This is not discipline. This is design. You're redesigning your nervous system. Now let's go one layer deeper, because it matters. Why did your brain believe that being chosen by them would prove you're enough? Usually it comes from somewhere older than this person. Maybe you grew up trying to earn love by being impressive. Maybe you learned that attention comes and goes, and you have to work to keep it. Maybe you were overlooked, or criticized, or compared. And now, this person, without even trying, became the symbol of a win you've been chasing your whole life. This time, I will be chosen. But you are not a child anymore, standing outside a closed door. You're an adult. You can choose which doors you walk through, and a door that requires you to shrink, to beg, to decode, to wait, is not your door. So here's the confrontational but compassionate truth. If they wanted you in the way you want them, you wouldn't be living in this much uncertainty. And I know there's a part of you that still wants to believe the opposite. That part is tender. It's trying to protect you from grief. But grief is not your enemy. Grief is the clean pain that heals. Ambiguity is the dirty pain that repeats. In the next part, we're going to draw the line in the sand. We'll talk about what no contact really means, not as punishment but as first aid. And I'll show you how to close the half-open door that leaks hope and pain at the same time. No contact isn't a weapon. It's not a dramatic statement. It's not you trying to win by disappearing. No contact is first aid. It's what you do when something is bleeding and you finally stop pretending it's just a scratch. Because when you're attached to someone you can't have, every tiny interaction becomes a reset of the addiction loop. One look, one like, one late night scroll, one, "Hey, how are you?" That feels innocent, but secretly carries a hope. Maybe this time it will turn into more. And the problem with hope, when it's attached to someone unavailable, is that it doesn't comfort you. It keeps you open, like a door that never fully closes. A half-open door feels better than a slammed one because it lets air in, it lets imagination in, it lets maybe in. But it also lets the cold in, and it keeps you living in the hallway. So if you want to get over them, the first thing you have to stop doing is living in the hallway. You close the door, not out of hatred, out of respect for your own nervous system. Now, people misunderstand no contact because they treat it like a moral decision. Am I being mean? Am I being immature? Shouldn't I be able to handle this? But no contact isn't about being good or bad. It's about being honest. Honest about what happens to you when you stay connected to someone who can't meet you fully. Honest about how quickly one small interaction turns into a day of rumination. Honest about how your progress collapses, not because you're weak, but because your brain is doing exactly what it's trained to do: chase the next chance. So let's define it clearly, because vague boundaries don't protect anyone. No contact means you remove the pathways that deliver them to your mind, not because they're toxic, not because they're a villain, but because the version of you that keeps hoping is vulnerable, and you have to protect that version the way you would protect someone you love. And this is where you might resist. You might say, "But I don't want to block them. That feels extreme." Or, "But what if they reach out with something important?" Or, "But we have mutual friends." Or the most honest one, "But if I close the door, it becomes real." Yes, that's the point. Because what's destroying you isn't the loss. It's the almost loss that never ends. No contact is choosing clean pain over dirty pain. Clean pain is grief. It hurts, and then it heals. Dirty pain is ambiguity. It hurts, and then it repeats. Now, no contact has levels, and I want you to think of it as designing an environment that makes relapse inconvenient. Because if you rely on willpower alone, you will lose on a bad night. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. You're tired. You're lonely. You're nostalgic. You remember the best moments. You forget the pattern. So you don't build a plan for your strongest self. You build a plan for your weakest moment. Here's what a real door close looks like, inside the story, not as a lecture. It looks like removing the thread you reread, the chat, the photos that act like emotional landmines, the saved voice notes, the playlist that makes you romanticize, the social media access that keeps them present in your day like background noise. Because every one of those is a wire connected to your nervous system, and when you touch the wire, you get shocked. And then you sit there asking, Why do I keep getting shocked? Because the wire is still there. So you remove it. Now listen, if there are practical constraints, work, shared responsibilities, mutual circles, then no contact becomes no unnecessary contact, no check-ins, no just wanted to see how you're doing, no lingering, no emotional intimacy, no private late-night conversations, no seeking reassurance. Communication becomes brief, factual, and purpose-based, like you're handling logistics with someone you're not emotionally attached to, because every extra sentence is fuel. And here's a rule that will sound harsh, but will save you. If contact keeps you hoping, it's not neutral, it's harm. Even if it's polite, even if it's friendly, even if it's sweet. Because sweetness without commitment is how you stay stuck. Now, what happens next, once you start no contact, is predictable. Your brain will protest. It will send you thoughts like messages. Text them one last time for closure. Just explain your feelings, then you'll be free. Just be honest. That's mature. But most of the time, closure is a beautiful word for one more pull of the slot machine, because you're not actually looking for closure. You're looking for a response that changes the ending. You're looking for them to suddenly become available, suddenly choose you, suddenly say the thing that makes it all worth it. And if they were capable of doing that, you wouldn't need closure. The relationship would be real. So instead of one last message, you give yourself one last promise. I'm not going back to the hallway. And this is where no contact becomes powerful, because it's not just about avoiding them. It's about breaking the association in your brain between craving and action. When you feel the urge and you don't act, you teach your nervous system something new. This feeling is not an emergency. This wave will pass. I can survive not getting the hit. That's how freedom begins. Quietly, repeatedly, not in one dramatic moment, in 100 small moments where you choose your dignity over your dopamine. Now, there's one more piece that makes no contact work. You don't just remove, you replace. Because if you remove the ritual of them, you'll feel the void. And the void can become unbearable if it stays empty. That's why people relapse. Not because they forget the pain, because they can't tolerate the silence. So, in the next part, we're building a real plan for the first 72 hours and the first 2 weeks. How to handle the cravings, what to do when your body panics, how to redesign your nights, your mornings, your phone, your routines. Because the goal isn't to be strong. The goal is to make healing easier than relapse. For the next 72 hours, your job isn't to be heroic. Your job is to be uninteresting to your own craving. Because right after you close the door, right after you stop checking, stop reaching, stop hovering in that hallway, your nervous system will react like you took away oxygen, and it will try to negotiate. It will try to trick you into just one small thing that reopens the loop. So if you want to get over them fast, you treat the first 3 days like a detox, not a moral detox, a biological one. Here's what to expect. Your mind will get louder before it gets quieter. You'll feel restless. You'll feel a weird sense of loss at random times, while brushing your teeth, while walking, while doing something ordinary. Your brain will bring up the best moments like a highlight reel designed to make you crack. You might even feel an urge to do something dramatic, send a final message, post something, stalk their profile, reread the thread. And I want you to understand what's happening in that moment. Your brain is trying to restore a familiar chemical pattern, not because this person is your destiny, because your brain learned a routine, and routines fight to survive. So let's build a counter routine that makes relapse harder than healing. The first move is simple. You remove friction from your healing and you add friction to your relapse. You don't rely on, "I'll be strong." You rely on, "I made it inconvenient." You change the environment so your weakest moment doesn't have easy access to your old habit. That means you don't keep the chat thread at the top of your screen like an open wound. You don't keep their photos one scroll away. You don't keep their story appearing in your feed like an invitation. Because the first rule of detox is, you don't tease the addiction. If you're thinking, "But I'm not addicted," okay, then prove it by removing the trigger and watching how your body reacts. If you feel panic, that's data. If you feel the urge to bargain, that's data. If you feel a pull like gravity, that's data. And you don't need to judge the data. You just use it. Now let's talk about the hardest part, the night. Because nights are where discipline dies. Nights are where nostalgia gets loud. Nights are where your mind says, "Just check, just see, just confirm." So for the first 72 hours, you redesign your nights like you're protecting a patient. You create a simple ritual that signals safety to your nervous system. It might sound small, but small is how you win. You choose one fixed time where your phone goes out of your room or onto the other side of the room. You choose one calming anchor, shower, tea, stretching, slow music, a walk, a book, journaling. And you choose one human lifeline, a friend you can text when the craving hits, or even just a note to yourself that you read instead of opening their profile. And here's the most important part. You pre-decide what you do when the urge hits, because the urge will hit. So you decide now while you're calm. When you feel the urge to contact them, you do 3 things in this exact order. You name it. This is a craving, not a truth. You delay it. I will not act for 24 hours. You redirect it. You do one action that changes your state. Body first, mind second. Because cravings live in the body. They show up as tension, tightness, restlessness, heat, heaviness in the chest, a feeling like you can't sit still. And the fastest way to shrink a craving is to change your physiology. Walk outside for 10 minutes, cold water on your face, push-ups, a quick shower, deep breaths, chewing gum, anything that interrupts the spiral. Then you give your mind something structured, not think positive, something structured. You write one sentence in your notes app. If I contact them right now, I'm really trying, fill the blank. Validation, comfort, hope, control, relief, belonging, proof. And once you know what you're trying to feel, you ask yourself, what's a healthier way to get that feeling tonight without reopening the loop? This is where you stop being a victim of the urge and become an architect of your own life. Now, there's a moment that almost everyone faces in detox, and it feels like this. You suddenly remember a sweet memory, and your heart softens, and you think, maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I should just send something kind. Maybe I'm overreacting. This is where you need one sentence that protects you. Kindness without boundaries is self-betrayal. You can care about someone and still choose distance. You can miss them and still not reach. You can love the idea of them and still refuse to live in the hallway, because the goal isn't to prove you're unbothered. The goal is to stop bleeding. And here's something else that will happen in the first week. You'll start romanticizing pain. Your mind will say, but it felt so intense. It felt special. I'll never feel that again. That's fear. That's the fear of ordinary peace. But peace is not ordinary. Peace is rare when you've been living in chaos. So your job in these first days is to teach your body that calm is not emptiness. Calm is safety. Now, practically, what do you do with the empty time? You don't fill it with distraction only, because distraction works for an hour, then the craving returns stronger. You fill it with something that rebuilds your identity. One small project, one habit, one promise you keep. Because every time you keep a promise to yourself, you become a person you trust again. And when you trust yourself, you stop chasing people who can't be trusted with your heart. So here's a simple 2-week container that makes the detox stick. For 14 days, you treat no contact as non-negotiable. Not forever. Just 14 days. That time frame matters because your brain can tolerate a boundary it can see. And each day, you do 3 small things. One thing for your body. A walk. A workout. Stretching. Sleep. Food. Something that tells your nervous system, we are okay. One thing for your mind. A journal entry. Reading. Therapy notes. Learning. Something that gives you structure. One thing for your people. A friend. Family. Community. Something that reminds you you're not alone. And if you skip a day, you don't collapse into guilt. You return the next day. The goal is not perfection. The goal is momentum. Now we need to prepare for something important, the void. Because when you stop feeding the obsession, a quiet emptiness can appear. And that emptiness can be terrifying because it feels like, if I'm not thinking about them, what do I have? But the truth is, that emptiness isn't proof that you lost something irreplaceable. It's proof that your mind had been crowded. And in the next part, we're going to talk about the void, how to survive it without relapsing, how to let grief be clean, and how to build a life that doesn't need a half-open door to feel alive. The void is the part nobody warns you about, because you think the hard part is stopping yourself from reaching out. You think the hard part is deleting the thread, muting the stories, resisting the midnight urge. But then you do it. You close the door, and suddenly it gets quiet. Not peaceful quiet at first, more like a silence that exposes everything you were using that person to cover up. A silence where you can finally hear your own thoughts without them in the background. A silence that feels like standing in a room after the music stops, your ears ringing a little, your body unsure what to do with itself. And that's when a dangerous thought shows up. It whispers, "See, you're empty without them." But that's not true. You're not empty. You're detoxing. When you remove a habit that hijacked a big portion of your attention, your brain doesn't immediately know what to do with the freed up space. So it calls that space loneliness. It calls it meaninglessness. It calls it, "I made a mistake." And if you don't understand this phase, you'll mistake withdrawal for destiny. You'll think, if I feel this bad without them, it must mean they were the one. No. Feeling bad without them can simply mean your nervous system got used to a certain kind of stimulation, uncertainty, anticipation, hope, disappointment, and now it's learning a new rhythm. This is the moment where you need a new definition of healing. Healing is not, "I don't feel anything." Healing is, "I feel it, and I don't let it drive the car." Because the void will try to drive. It will create urgency. It will push you toward contact like contact is medicine. It will say, "Just talk to them, you'll feel better." And maybe you will feel better for 10 minutes. But then the loop restarts. And you know what comes after 10 minutes of relief? Another day of scanning, decoding, waiting, hoping. That's why the void is where you either graduate or you repeat. So let's get very practical while staying inside the story. There are 2 kinds of pain in this phase. There's clean grief, and there's dirty craving. Clean grief is sadness that doesn't beg, it doesn't bargain, it doesn't try to manipulate reality. It's just the honest recognition, I wanted something, I didn't get it. That hurts. Clean grief is the kind of pain that leaves you more human afterward. It softens you, it widens you, it teaches you to love without losing yourself. Dirty craving is different. Dirty craving is urgent. It's restless. It says, fix it now. It tells you stories like, if you reach out, the discomfort will stop. It's not asking you to grieve. It's asking you to reopen the door. So your job in the void is to learn to tell them apart. Here's how you know you're in grief. You can still respect yourself while you feel it. Here's how you know you're in craving. You feel like you have to do something, anything, to escape the feeling, even if it costs your dignity. And that brings us to one of the most important skills you can build in your life. Maybe not just for this relationship, but for everything. The ability to sit with discomfort without turning it into self-betrayal. Because so much of adulthood is exactly that. You will feel lonely sometimes. You will feel uncertain sometimes. You will feel rejected sometimes. And the question isn't whether you feel it. The question is what you do in response. Do you run back to what hurts you because it's familiar? Or do you build a new familiar? Now, I want to say something that might surprise you. In many cases, you weren't just attached to them. You were attached to the role they gave you, the role of the one who waits, the role of the one who hopes, the role of the one who can't let go. It's painful, but it's also a kind of identity. It gives your day a storyline. It gives your suffering a purpose. And when you remove that storyline, your brain panics because it has to face a bigger question. What am I living for if I'm not living for this? That question is not a crisis. That question is an opening. It's your life asking for an upgrade. So here's what you do with the void. You don't fill it with noise. You fill it with meaning. But meaning doesn't arrive as a thunderbolt. It arrives as a practice. This is where reclaiming territory becomes real. Your attention has been occupied. Your imagination has been occupied. Your evenings, your mornings, your emotional energy, occupied. So now you take it back, piece by piece, like returning to a home you haven't lived in properly for a long time. Start with the smallest rooms, your morning, your night, your phone. Because if you reclaim those, you reclaim your mind. In the morning, before your brain can start reaching for them, you give it a new anchor, something consistent, something simple. You don't wait to feel motivated. You just do it, because that's what anchors do. They hold even when you're stormy. It could be 10 minutes of walking outside. It could be writing 3 lines in a journal. What do I feel? What do I need? What will I do today that respects me? It could be a workout. It could be reading 1 page of something that makes you bigger than your craving. And at night, you stop treating your bed like a courtroom where you put yourself on trial. You don't let yourself lie there replaying, because replaying is not processing. Replaying is self-harm disguised as thinking. So you create a closing ritual, a small signal to your nervous system. We're done for today. You dim the lights, you stretch, you put the phone away. You do something that tells your body, nothing needs to be solved tonight. Now, there's a particularly painful moment that happens in the void. It's when you start to forget. Not forget them completely, but forget the intensity. You might go a few hours, then realize you didn't think about them, and suddenly you feel a stab of guilt. like you're betraying something, like your love wasn't real. But that guilt is not proof of loyalty. It's proof that your identity was tangled with the obsession. Real love doesn't require you to suffer to prove it existed, and letting go is not rewriting history. Letting go is refusing to let history steal your future. So here's a question I want you to sit with for a moment, gently. If your attachment requires you to keep hurting to feel close, is it attachment to a person or attachment to pain? And another question, even gentler. What would it look like to love yourself with the same consistency you tried to give them? Because the void is basically this, a space where your love finally has to come home. Now, to be honest, you're going to wobble. You'll have days where you feel proud and clear, and days where you feel like you're back at day one. That's normal. Healing is not a straight line. It's more like the ocean, waves, tides, shifts. But the key is that each time you don't act on the craving, you rewire something. Each time you choose not to check, not to reach, not to reopen the door, you're building a new identity. I am the kind of person who chooses myself. And that identity is the opposite of obsession. Obsessions say, my life is on pause until you choose me. Self-respect says, my life is moving with or without your permission. In the next part, we're going to do something powerful. We're going to rebuild your identity on purpose, not as a vague motivational idea, but as a practical design. How to reclaim your time, how to fill your calendar with things that make you stronger, how to stop measuring your day by their presence, and how to become someone who doesn't even want a half-open door anymore. When you stop chasing someone you can't have, you don't just lose a person, you lose a schedule. And that sounds almost funny until you notice how much of your day was quietly organized around them. Not explicitly, not on your calendar, but in your attention, in your micro-decisions, in the way you'd delay your workout just in case they text, in the way you'd keep your evening open just in case something happens, in the way your mind kept a small tab running in the background at all times, like a browser window you never close. So rebuilding your identity isn't some dramatic reinvention where you become a completely different person overnight. It's simpler, it's quieter, it's you taking your time back and giving it a job. Because empty time is where relapse hides, and purposeful time is where freedom grows. Here's the core idea. You don't move on by thinking your way out of attachment. You move on by living your way out of attachment. Your brain is persuaded by evidence, not speeches. So you start giving it new evidence daily that your life is not a waiting room anymore. Now, let's do this in a way that actually works. First, you stop building your day around emotions. Because emotions are weather. They change, they surprise you, they lie sometimes. And if your plan depends on you feeling strong, you will eventually fail on a day you feel lonely. Instead, you build your day around structure, not rigid structure, human structure. A few anchors that repeat no matter what. I want you to imagine your attention like a flashlight. Right now, it keeps pointing at the same corner of the room, at them. Even when you try to force it away, it swings back, because it's trained. So you don't just say, stop. You give the flashlight a new job. You pick 3 identity anchors, 3 areas where you will prove to yourself, slowly, that you belong to your own life. One anchor is your body, because your body is where anxiety lives. Your chest, your stomach, your jaw, your sleep. When you're attached to someone unavailable, your body pays the price first. So the fastest way to regain stability is to treat your body like a home you're repairing. And this doesn't mean you need a perfect fitness plan. It means you choose one physical practice you can do even on a bad day. A walk, 10 minutes of movement, a short workout, stretching before bed. Something simple enough that you can't fail at it. Because consistency is what changes identity. The second anchor is your mind, not thinking about them. That's not your mind. That's your mind stuck in a loop. This anchor is learning, building, creating, reading a book that expands you, writing, studying a skill, therapy, journaling, anything that turns your attention into growth. When your mind has a real mission, it stops begging for the old mission. The third anchor is your people, because obsession shrinks your world down to one person, and the cure is expansion. You don't have to be wildly social, you just have to be connected. One friend you check in with, one weekly plan, one community space, one conversation that reminds your nervous system, I am not alone. Now, here's where it becomes practical in a way that keeps you from romanticizing the past. You create a replacement calendar. Because your brain is going to ask, what do I do with the time I used to spend on them? And if you don't answer that question with real plans, your brain will answer it with, think about them. So you take out the hours that were most dangerous, usually mornings and nights, and you assign them something, not something massive, something repeatable. Morning, one body action, one mind action. Night, one calming ritual, one connection or closure practice. And suddenly your day has edges. It has shape. It has a beginning and an end that doesn't revolve around checking your phone. Now, I want to address something subtle. Your brain will try to sabotage this with perfectionism. It will say, if I can't rebuild my whole life, why try? Or, if I miss one day, it means I'm failing. That's the same all-or-nothing thinking that kept you stuck. Either they choose me completely, or I'm nothing. We're not doing that anymore. We're doing something more mature and more powerful. Small commitments that you keep, even when you don't feel like it. Because every kept commitment is a vote for a new identity. And the identity you're building is simple. I don't chase what doesn't choose me. That identity sounds like a quote, but it becomes real only when you behave like it's true, especially when you're tempted not to. So, let's talk about temptation, because it's going to show up in a specific form. You'll start to miss the intensity. You'll miss the feeling of having a special person in your mind. You'll miss the narrative. And you might even miss the pain, because pain was familiar. Pain was a companion. Pain gave your days a storyline. I'm waiting, I'm hoping, I'm almost there. But a storyline is not a life. A storyline is something you consume. A life is something you build. So every time you feel that pull toward intensity, you do a small pivot. You choose depth instead of drama. Depth looks like a long walk, a hard conversation with yourself, a real project, real friendships, real sleep, real nourishment. It's less flashy, but it's steady. It doesn't spike you and crash you. It makes you calmer, not crazier. And here's a critical shift that seals everything. You stop measuring your day by whether they appeared. You start measuring your day by whether you showed up. Did you protect your boundary today? Did you move your body today? Did you build something today? Did you connect with someone who is actually in your life today? Because the moment you change the scoreboard, you change the game. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but what if they come back while I'm rebuilding? Good, let them. Not because you want them, but because you'll meet that moment as a different person. A person with structure, with self-respect, with a life that doesn't collapse if someone is inconsistent. And that leads us to the next step, the part that truly relapse-proofs your progress. What to do when they text you again. Because if you plan for that moment now, you won't be improvising from loneliness later. This is the moment that breaks most people. Not because they're weak, because they don't plan for it. You're doing okay. You've closed the door. You've had a few calmer days. You've started to reclaim your time. Your nervous system is slowly learning a new rhythm. And then it happens. A notification, a name, a message that's just warm enough to light you up and just vague enough to keep you guessing. Hey, how have you been? And suddenly your body reacts before your mind can even speak. Your chest tightens, your stomach flips, your thoughts speed up. You feel that familiar surge, the chemical proof that you still care. And in that moment, you're standing at a fork in the road. One path is old, automatic. It says, respond fast, respond sweet. Show you're available. Hope this time becomes different. The other path is new, deliberate. It says, protect your progress, respect your nervous system, don't trade your peace for a spark. Here's the most important truth about this moment. A message is not a relationship. A message is not effort. A message is not commitment. A message is a stimulus. And if you treat a stimulus like proof, you will rebuild the addiction loop in a single evening. So we're going to design your response the way you'd design a safety system, because that's what this is. First rule, you don't respond from the first wave, because the first wave is craving disguised as excitement. So you adopt a simple policy that becomes your backbone. You wait. Not as a manipulation tactic, as self-respect. You give yourself at least 24 hours before any reply, especially if you feel a rush. Because rush is not clarity. Rush is chemistry. And during those 24 hours, you ask yourself one question that cuts through the noise. If I reply, what am I really hoping will happen? Be brutally honest. Are you hoping they finally confess? Are you hoping it turns into a date? Are you hoping for closure? Are you hoping for proof you still matter to them? Because that hope is the hook, and if you don't name it, it will steer you. Now, second rule, you don't reward breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs are contact without commitment, warmth without direction, attention without responsibility. Breadcrumbs feel kind, but they keep you stuck in the hallway because they reopen the half-open door. They give you a tiny hit of maybe, and then you're back to scanning. So your new standard is simple. If someone wants to be in your life, they make it clear. Not perfect, not always poetic, but clear. And clarity has a shape. It looks like consistency. It looks like effort. It looks like plans, not vibes. This is where you need to stop listening to words and start reading patterns. Because the mind is easily seduced by language. I miss you. I've been thinking. I'm sorry. I'm not ready, but the body keeps the receipts. The body remembers how it felt to be left hanging. So here's the third rule. Your response, if you choose to respond at all, should protect your dignity. It should not reopen intimacy. It should not invite ambiguity. It should not turn into a late-night emotional conversation that leaves you more attached. Think of your message like a door policy. You're not rude. You're not cold. You're just clear about what enters your life now. There are only 3 categories of messages you might receive. 1. Purely casual check-ins that lead nowhere. 2. Emotionally charged messages that pull you back into the loop. 3. Clear, direct messages that offer real intention. and your response depends on the category. If it's category 1, "Hey, how are you?" with no direction, your response should be polite, brief, and non-expanding. You don't ask 10 questions back. You don't keep the thread alive. You don't give it oxygen. Because the goal is not to restart conversation. The goal is to protect your nervous system. If it's category 2, apologies, I miss you, nostalgia, emotional intimacy, this is where you must remember the difference between warmth and commitment. Warmth can be given by anyone. Commitment has a cost. So you respond only if you can do it from self-respect, not longing. And if you can't, you don't respond yet. You wait until you can. If it's category 3, clear intention, then you still don't hand over your heart. You evaluate. Because even clear intention can be temporary. The question becomes, is this aligned with your new standard, or is this another chapter in the old story? Now, the most dangerous belief you can carry into this moment is, this time will be different. It might be. But you don't gamble your peace on might. You require evidence, and evidence isn't one message. Evidence is consistent behavior over time. Here's a line I want you to internalize. If they want access to you, they need to earn it with consistency. Not with urgency, not with charm, not with midnight tenderness, with consistency. Because consistency is what your nervous system has been starving for. Now let's address the emotional reality. If you don't respond the old way, you may feel grief. You may feel like you're losing them again. You may even feel a weird sense of powerlessness, like you're letting something good slip away. But ask yourself, what are you actually letting slip away? A relationship that was mutual and stable, or a loop that kept you anxious and addicted to possibility? Because sometimes what we call losing is actually withdrawing from a drug, and the withdrawal feels like loss until you remember what the drug was costing you. So here's your relapse-proof mindset for this moment. I don't owe instant access to someone who couldn't offer steady presence. That sentence isn't cruelty, it's maturity. Now, in the next part, we're going to zoom out and build your new standard in a way that protects your future. How to tell the difference between real love and longing, how to choose peace over intensity, and how to stop confusing anxiety with chemistry. Because once you have a standard, you don't need willpower as much. You just need honesty. There's a difference between love and longing. And if you've been stuck on someone you can't have, there's a good chance you've been living in longing while calling it love, because longing is loud. It's cinematic. It has tension. It has suspense. It has that aching feeling in your chest that seems to prove the depth of your emotion. But love, real love, is quieter. Not boring, not flat, just steady. Love doesn't need constant interpretation. Love doesn't come in fragments. Love doesn't require you to abandon yourself in order to keep it alive. So let's draw a clean line, because you need a standard that your emotions can't talk you out of on a lonely night. Longing says, I want you. Love says, I choose you, and I show it. Longing is often about intensity. Love is about consistency. Longing makes you anxious because it depends on uncertainty. Love makes you calmer over time because it's built on safety. Longing is fueled by distance, scarcity, and almost. Love is fueled by presence, effort, and clarity. Now, I want to be careful, because the word calm can sound like settling. And you might be thinking, so you're telling me passion is bad? Passion is beautiful. But passion without safety becomes addiction. And that's the key distinction. In healthy love, Intensity can exist without instability. You can feel excited without feeling threatened. You can feel desire without feeling like your whole worth is on trial. In unhealthy attachment, the intensity is often anxiety wearing a romantic costume. It feels like chemistry because your nervous system is activated. It feels like fate because it's consuming your attention. It feels like depth because it hurts. But pain is not depth. Pain is information. So here's a question that cuts through the romantic fog. Does this connection expand your life or shrink it? When you're in love, healthy love, your world gets bigger. You sleep better. You focus more. You feel more like yourself. You still have your interests. You still have your friends. You still have a stable sense of who you are. When you're in longing, your world shrinks to one point. Your mood depends on one person's behavior. Your day bends around their presence or absence. Your brain becomes a surveillance system. And you might call that devotion. But devotion without reciprocity is self-erasure. Now let's build your standard in a way that's practical, not as a list you forget, but as a truth you feel. Your standard has 3 pillars: clarity, consistency, and mutual effort. Clarity means you don't have to guess where you stand. You're not decoding. You're not reading tea leaves. You're not trying to turn a maybe into a yes. The person makes their intentions understandable through action. Consistency means the pattern is stable over time, not perfect. Humans have off days, but the overall direction is steady. It doesn't keep you in a cycle of high highs and low lows. Mutual effort means you're not the engine. You're not the only one initiating. You're not the only one repairing. You're not the only one carrying the emotional labor. You're met. You're matched. If those 3 pillars aren't present, then what you're calling love is often just hope. And hope can be beautiful until it becomes a lifestyle. Here's another uncomfortable truth. A lot of people are addicted to intensity because intensity distracts them from themselves. If your inner world is painful, lonely, restless, uncertain, then chasing someone unavailable gives you a mission. It gives you a reason for your suffering. It gives you a storyline that's more exciting than facing your own emptiness. And I say that with compassion, not judgment. Because sometimes longing is how we avoid sitting with the deeper question, what do I really need? Not from them, from life, from myself. Maybe you need belonging. Maybe you need validation. Maybe you need tenderness. Maybe you need stability. Maybe you need to feel chosen. Those are human needs. But here's the mistake. You turned one person into the only supplier. And the moment you do that, you hand them power they never asked for, and you hand yourself a problem that can't be solved through chasing. So the new standard isn't just about choosing better people. It's about choosing better dynamics. Because the dynamic you want is simple. A relationship that does not require you to betray yourself. And betrayal can look very subtle. It can look like laughing at jokes that hurt you because you don't want to seem sensitive. It can look like pretending you're okay with inconsistency because you don't want to seem needy. It can look like shrinking your expectations until they fit someone else's limitations. And here's the irony. When you shrink yourself to keep someone, you don't actually keep them. You just lose you. So let's anchor your standard in one sentence you can remember when your emotions start arguing. If it costs me my peace, it's too expensive. That sentence doesn't mean relationships should be effortless. It means you're no longer paying with your dignity. Now, there's a final test of your standard, and it's the simplest one. Ask, if a close friend described this situation to you, would you want it for them? Would you tell them, keep waiting, it's romantic? Or would you tell them, you deserve someone who's sure? Because you often know the truth immediately when it's not your own heart on the line. And that's what we're building here, the ability to treat yourself like someone you're responsible for. Now, in the final part, we're going to close the loop. We'll take everything we covered, truth, fantasy, addiction, boundaries, detox, the void, rebuilding, relapse-proofing, standards, and we'll turn it into a quiet, powerful ending. A commitment you can actually keep. Not a motivational high that fades tomorrow, but a small set of daily choices that make it almost impossible to return to the hallway. And we'll end with a simple affirmation you can leave in the comments, something that isn't cheesy, something you can mean. You've spent enough time in the hallway. That's the image I want to leave you with, because it captures the entire trap in one quiet scene, a half-open door, a draft of hope, a draft of pain. You standing there, convincing yourself that waiting is noble, that patience is love, that any minute now is a plan. But a hallway is not a life, and the hardest truth, also the most freeing one, is this. The moment you accept you can't have them, you stop negotiating with reality. You stop paying with your time for a maybe that never becomes a yes. You stop turning your heart into a place where inconsistency gets to live rent-free. So let's close this loop, not with a dramatic finale, but with something stronger than drama, a decision you can keep. Because getting over someone you can't have is not one giant act of willpower. It's a series of small, repeated choices that slowly rewrite your nervous system. It's you choosing clean pain over dirty pain. It's you choosing dignity over dopamine. It's you choosing a warm life over a warm moment. And I know the mind will still argue sometimes. It will say, but what if they change? Maybe they will. But you can't build your life around maybe. You can't place your peace on layaway. You can't keep your future hostage to someone else's readiness. So here's the commitment. Not forever, not as a punishment, but as a practice. I will not audition for someone who's unsure. And that commitment has a few quiet implications. It means you stop checking, because checking is a form of hope. It means you stop reaching, because reaching keeps the story alive. It means you stop replaying, because replaying is contact without contact. It means you stop interpreting crumbs as meals. And if you stumble, because you're human, you don't turn the stumble into a collapse. You don't say, I failed, so I might as well go all the way back. You say, I noticed the loop trying to restart. And then you return to your standard, because the standard is the guardrail that protects you when your emotions are loud. Let me give you a simple way to hold that standard in your body, not just your mind. When you feel the urge, the sudden heat, the restlessness, the fantasy rising like a wave, you pause and ask one question. What is the price of one more contact? Not the price in the moment. You already know the moment feels good. That's why it's tempting. The price tomorrow. The price in your sleep. The price in your focus. The price in your self-respect. The price in the hours you'll spend decoding, hoping, crashing. Because your freedom doesn't require you to hate them. It requires you to see the cost clearly. And once you see the cost, something changes. The urge doesn't look romantic anymore. It looks expensive. Now, I also want to say something tender, because endings matter. You might still care about them. You might still miss them. You might still feel a little ache when you hear a song, or pass a place, or see a name that resembles theirs. That doesn't mean you should go back. It means you're human. Missing someone is not a command. It's just a feeling passing through. And you can honor the feeling without obeying it. This is what maturity looks like. You can hold longing in your hands and still not build your home inside it. So here's what I want you to do after this episode, something small enough to actually happen. For the next 14 days, you choose yourself in 3 small ways each day. One thing that strengthens your body, one thing that strengthens your mind, one thing that strengthens your connections with real people in your real life. And every day you do that, you're not just moving on, you're building evidence. Evidence that your life is not a waiting room. Evidence that you can create stability without someone else's permission. Evidence that you are capable of loving yourself with consistency, something you might have been trying to earn from someone else. And at the end of those 14 days, you won't magically forget them. But you'll be different. You'll be less hungry, less reactive, less willing to accept ambiguity as romance. You'll have built the foundation for the kind of love you actually deserve. Mutual, clear, steady, respectful. The kind of love that doesn't require you to abandon yourself to keep it alive. So let's end with one final question. Quiet, but sharp. How much more time are you willing to pay for a maybe? And if your answer is no more, then that's your beginning. Not their text, not their apology, not their sudden clarity. Your beginning is you choosing yourself right now. If you want to lock this in publicly, if you want to make it real, leave a comment with this short affirmation. I choose myself today. Not because a comment changes your life, but because repetition does. Because saying it out loud, even once, is you stepping out of the hallway and back into your own home.